Thank you, Leela. That's a very fine presentation. I think you've raised a number of issues, and I'm glad you also raised the issue, which hadn't been done earlier, as to what is the general feeling in the audience about the peaceful rise of China. Is it inevitable that China will rise peacefully? Because I think most of the speakers in the preceding sessions looked at China as an economic opportunity, which undoubtedly it is. But what if it does not rise peacefully? And as all rising powers, what if it turns out to be assertive and pushy? So that issue has been brought up. I'll now open the questions to the audience. If you just indicate with your hand, I'll... Yep, Subha.
Two questions. The first one is to Professor Muni. Sir, the point that you made that India have to creatively engage the democratic upsurge in Southeast Asia. You gave the example of Myanmar. But is there a democratic upsurge, sir? What is happening in Myanmar, would you consider it as a democratic upsurge? Or it's a kind of a top, it's decided by the top, and they are allowing that space to the multiple actors. Even the actors are, given the Rohingya example and how the majority, even the great lady, treats the Rohingya issue, I'm not sure, sir, whether this is a democracy that we may want to support. I'm not terribly convinced that there is a democratic upsurge, and this democratic upsurge that we see in Myanmar is something that we may like to support. I don't know, sir, what can be the creative one that we can, what creative ideas we could have. That's question one. The second question is on India as a great democracy. Did Southeast Asia look India as a great democracy and look to us favorably, or they're looking at something else? If India's democratic norms have been the reason for they looking at us, then they should have looked at us in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So what is happening in the last 15 years is something that has made us a factor. So I'm not convinced of this democratic factor. That's a question. The second question is, Ambassador Ponnappa, ma'am, you made that point on soft power. You're kind of dismissing, or that's the impression that I had. My point is, if only we liberalize our visa regime. There are multiple ambassadors who have served in these countries. I understand in the top level there is a perfect positive attitude, but our hard power, especially how our bureaucracy is in Southeast Asia, is killing our soft power, whatever we have. You asked about why people are not coming why students are not coming for other areas. Who will come, if you have such restrictions? Unless I think what our greatest soft power, tourism, Buddhist circuit and other things, it's being kind of not exploited because of our hard-handedness, especially our bureaucracy in the respective missions. I'm sorry if I have...
No, happy to answer that. Yeah, any other? We'll take 2 or 3 questions together. Mohan, did you raise your hand? No, you did. Yeah, okay, press on. Use your mic.
Commented this morning about how many exercises China has done in Tibet. Now, I was wondering if there's some Chinese fellow sitting in Hainan. He's probably commenting on, making a note of the exercises we do. Right now, the Indian Navy's got the 2 fleets are exercising below the Indian Ocean on tropic exercises. They have all the ships out there. The Chakra is out there. Everything is a huge exercise coordinated by net-centric satellite exercise. Now, this is a game which goes on all the time. Just to look at China doing it and saying that, that's threatening. And why the neighbors note, at least because we don't note these things in our domestic discourse, we don't have it. The neighbors note all these things. How many exercises have we done?
Any others? Yep, please.
One addition to that, a year ago I was in China, and there was a small newspaper item in India which said that a Sukhoi 30 did a non-stop flight from Silchar to Jamnagar. and came back with air-to-air refueling. The Chinese press picked it up. The Chinese press said, these guys are signaling that they can come inside and go back. And wherever you go in China to think tanks, as I do often, this question comes, why are you building up the biggest 4+ generation air force in the world? When we finish our modernization in 2021, with the Pakfa coming in, you will have over 500 4+ generation aircraft. I mean, people are going to notice this. And therefore you can't say that everything is unidirectional. One pointed at me. After all, you're also waving a sword. Vijay?
While I may agree with what Mohan has just stated, these are things that are quite routinely done, and they're always picked up. Whether you get an air-to-air refueling and then bring it around the Cape of Good Hope or whatever it is to say I can get to you. But leaving that aside, there is a problem. Just as China is willing to announce that there were 2 events in the 90s that have actually shaped their entire modernization program. The first was the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, where they said that if you build up forces, if you mobilize forces, then that is the first salvo you fired. And that is at the heart of the excess denial strategy. The second was this 2-carrier group in the Taiwan Straits. They felt impotent. That here we are pooping off a few artillery rounds and a few short-range missiles in the general direction of Taiwan, and they've come in here with 2 aircraft carriers, and we can do nothing about it. What I'm trying to get at is that in order to have a strategic approach of this nature, that listen, these are the seminal events which is going to be the linchpin upon which I strategize and in fact have my modernization programs. We are unable to do that because somewhere there is no, should we say, government credible, it has to be credible to the government, institution that can even advise government on these issues. And therefore at every stage, the Indian government is responding to operational issues. I mean, one of the most absurd policies, which I realize as a very young officer has got something to do with the continent, the subcontinent, stop your road building activity 10 kilometers short of the border. No, this is a joke. Your own land, which you're supposed to protect every inch of it, you're saying stop it. Why? Because it'll fall anyway. We're going to lose it. Anyway, this sort of warped operational logic is a fact that I think most of us, not us, we may contend with it now, but we are unable to contend with it at a time when we were in a position. I would put it to the panel. Do you have any suggestions as to how to make more credible organizations that think for you, and everything you say need not be implemented, but certainly some of the core issues cannot be forgotten. The Chinese, when they say CAS is the think tank for the government, they're telling you something, that CAS stands for something. The panel's view on this.
Yeah.
On democracy, on Myanmar, you said that there is no upsurge. I mean, this has been a pressure on the military regime all along, not only internationally, both we and ASEAN diplomatically continued to talk to the Myanmarese generals that they must loosen the hold over the people, largely because, and even while we adjusted and compromised with the military rulers, we never really detached ourselves from the democratic factions. It's a different story that Aung San Suu Kyi's own organization got dissipated. There were all kind of internal problems and the whole thing became very weak. But at no stage we stood up against the democratic factions within Myanmar, at no stage. And I suggest that the change which you see in, you said it is top down, but not without pressure. See, armies are not known to voluntarily surrender power anywhere. monarchies are not known to voluntarily surrender power. And in this case, may I submit that if you come little bit closer to the home from Myanmar, in the last decade, there have been 3 tremendous democratic upsurges in India's neighborhood, and India very quietly, in many ways, very successfully brought about almost breakthrough solutions, which got vitiated later on. I mean, as you heard me the other day, breakthroughs and breakdowns. But in Nepal, in Maldives, and this time in Bangladesh, that we stuck our neck out against all kind of international opposition to supporting Hasina, whatever the election has gone. So it's not that India is not capable of number one, or it is not committed to. We are, of course, apparently committed not to export democracies, no regime changes. Fair enough. But wherever these forces are, I think we should strengthen them. And why I made this argument is not only Myanmar, I said Thailand, is a very critical question. And may I share it with you that even within Singapore, I find tremendous public pressure now. The last elections indicated very clearly that people are not happy with the kind of regime which is continuing. So it's a trend. And in that trend, you link with Rohingyas. In fact, I mentioned that the Buddhist-Muslim conflict is troublesome for us. And that's not, yes, I mean, the armies are ruthless at times, even in Philippines, even in Thailand to some extent. But that doesn't mean that we stand by them. We only stand by opening of the political system, which somehow must accommodate them in one way or the other. Whether the Southeast Asians have our view as a great democracy or not, but certainly democracy is one of the factors which does not worry them, bother them, for India to be a very aggressive country. And it's not the preference for one system or another, but it is certainly a factor in their considerations. That it's a lethargic, it is a wobbly kind of a democracy, but the system is better than the other one. And in the context of the systems now opening up, it's a challenge which is not perceptible to us today. I guess in about 5 years' time, you will see the implications in a very, very strong manner. May I, on question of, the Indian exercises, I'm not a military man, but even it was Vikrant which was introduced some time back. The Chinese got very disturbed. They had all kind of discussions as to what are the implications of India introducing this new aircraft carrier. On the revamping of the Andaman Nicobar, they have been absolutely correct. They are following very, very closely as to what even BAS, when it came, in terms of a surveillance system. They are very cautious as to what the implications are. And one interpretation is that because of these, that yes, in some little areas, India is having some what you call deterrent postures or capabilities coming up, that they are willing to talk to you. The other day, as I mentioned to you, for the last 8 months, and this was a news to me when I heard from the almost horse's mouth, that they are willing to talk to you even the nuclear issue. They earlier thought you are simply not capable. You don't have the kind of wherewithal where they must be talking to us on military level. And they are quite worried about all the exercises which India has with the US. I may say something on Taiwan blockade, 1996, sir, which you mentioned very rightly. To a very significant way, that blockade drove or prompted China to have what we today see so-called pearl of the string of pearls or whatever else it is, because they wanted to look for alternative ways if they are really blockading. In fact, in the previous section we were gossiping and I said, is US still capable of blockading China? The answer is yes, and the Chinese know it. And if that happens, they cannot afford for 15 days for their oil supplies not reaching the mainland. Therefore, they will have to find out some of the alternative ways which may not sound very viable at the moment. Gwadar, for instance, is not a viable oil route for Shanghai or whatever you call it. But they'll try and breach this handicap as much as possible.
When I said that, and I didn't mean to do down soft power, Subha, don't get me wrong. All I'm saying is that soft power alone does not do the job. Hollywood is effective because of American clout behind it. American power, whether you view it positively or not, is based on America's capabilities and not because of Hollywood. Hollywood is the extra bit of it. Likewise with India, or even with China. China also is beginning to look at the benefits of its soft power. So they build an institution of Chinese learning, fantastic architecture, empty classrooms, but Confucius Institutes in Nepal, very impressive. And the issue of who comes to study what in India, it has absolutely nothing to do with the visas. It has to do with scholarships given by the government of India. And I think with the best of intentions, there were 10 scholarships in Thailand when I went there, which were all given to Buddhist monks. Not an issue, it's a good thing. All I'm trying to say is you've got to expand that ambit. So we did not deprive the Buddhist monks of their scholarships, but we got another 40 scholarships by which youngsters came to India to study everything from English to IT to engineering. So that the totality of the package was more comprehensive. You've made a very specific thing that it is the visa regime that keeps tourists and such like from coming. Unless there is some specific information that you have, to the best of my knowledge, Indian missions are among the few, and I'm subject to correction on this, where visas are issued within the working day to tourists who wish to come to India. I don't know that any of these other countries with huge tourist arrivals, particularly Western countries, whose treatment of visa applicants leaves much to be desired, as we know within Delhi itself, it does the same kind of thing. So this is not what keeps people out. Yes, there are certain restrictions that come, let us say, when scholars have to come. This has nothing to do with what happens at the missions, because this is based on instructions from the government of India. And I don't wish to get into a spitting match on ministries, but if you need to know, it is from Home Affairs. The problem with all such things is what is the point of balance between security interests and otherwise. There's been a long battle going on for as long as I've been in service, which has been 36 plus years, where cardiologists, urologists had to go through security clearances. I don't know if there's been any modification of that yet in terms of holding conferences and such like. So there's really no problem as far as I know with the visa regime, unless there is something specific that you have, and in which case certainly please let's discuss it. Soft power as a whole, good thing, but in itself and alone, as we say, IPCS had organized this on soft power. It's wonderful when it works. But as, wasn't it Stalin who said, how many divisions did the Pope have? I think we need to recall that. Mohan's point that the game goes on, when I spoke about the fact that India has been a security provider or has done exercises or got so overwhelmed by raising two-strike core, my point is that these are not articulated clearly in an open, transparent manner as policies of the government of India, with no sense of being defensive. My point was not that I'm trying to demonize China for holding those exercises. In fact, we need to guard against either romanticizing or demonizing China. China will do certain things which it needs to, and I think very often some of its positions against the United States are perfectly warranted. I mean, if you had Chinese ships prowling around Florida and such like, the Americans would get hysterical. And China is somewhat short of that. But India exercising in some of these places, if we are doing it, let us have the confidence to be able to say that this is what we consider as part of our area and ambit of interest. There is a tendency to shy away from viewing positive military power as part of our actual national interests and stating it. And this was really what my problem was. I was not questioning, trying to balance our method of holding exercises vis-a-vis China's. Admiral Vijay Shankar's question about there seems to be an inability for India to strategize these things. Well, the National Security Council system was supposed to address it. But I think every country that has tried to institute these, unless there has been a very clear fiat from the top, has found that sometimes these structures are not entirely allowed to function to the full point of their success. Perhaps Ambassador Lata Reddy would wish to add to that. But if I were to toss out a theoretical question, as I did over the coffee break, if tomorrow the government of India were to announce that a Ministry of National Security has been set up to handle all issues of national security in a comprehensive manner, you tell me which ministry of the government of India would not be concerned, including culture. Because identity, culture, these are all very important elements of internal social cohesion. So I think this is work in progress. I think many of us have tried to break our heads on this particular aspect. And sometimes the articulation of a doctrine helps to crystallize this in terms of how the state shall act given a particular security threat, whether it's internal or external. The system is just slightly over 10 years old. There is the report of this high-level committee, which is still under wraps, hasn't yet been publicized. But I hope that the work in progress will see greater momentum in the months to come. Certainly needs a more credible organization. I think this covers the questions that they raised. Lata has.
Lata, would you like to add something before we finish?
I'm sorry to insist on having the last word. That was not the intention. But since Leela did ask me to amplify on the last matter, I just wanted to add my voice to hers when she said that the National Security Council was in fact there to coordinate on matters of national strategy and security. But given the form of government that we have with ministries and departments and organizations which feel that certain issues of strategy and security are clearly under their purview, it's going to be an uphill task for anyone who tries to coordinate a national security doctrine. Various attempts have been made, and I hope will continue to be made, to clearly elucidate a national security doctrine. I personally, and now that I'm out of the government, I can voice my personal view. I'm totally in favor of us publishing white papers, doctrine papers. I think it's important because I think the government does itself a great disservice by not being transparent with the public, because the impression is if you don't say anything, you're not doing anything. And that's not true. You know, there is a lot being done, there is a lot being debated, and I think if they shared what they could share with the public, it would actually raise the credibility of the whole system. The second thing I wanted to say, and perhaps I should have said it in the Southeast Asia section, is I think we've done very wisely in becoming very active with ASEAN and the EAS. And two things which I think were very crucial were creating a specific office of a joint secretary dealing with ASEAN in the foreign ministry and a division in the foreign ministry. And we saw a quantum leap in how much we did. This was during Hemant's term in Indonesia as ambassador. And the second thing which I'm happy to announce is we've now created the post of permanent representative to ASEAN as distinct from our ambassador in ASEAN. And for once, the ministry has found exactly the right person for the job. And Suresh Reddy, who was the first joint secretary, ASEAN, is going there as the permanent representative. So I hope this combination of things of a dedicated person in India, a dedicated person in Indonesia will really take our engagement in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, and through that into Asia-Pacific architecture to new heights. Thank you.
Yeah, quick one. We won't wrap up.
Northeastern passage. It cuts short the route to China specifically for movement of goods to and from Europe. You had mentioned that. I just learned to my delight that the inheritor state of India, that is the Indian Empire, is a co-signatory in the Arctic Council. Now, if you are a co-signatory, that itself gives us the right to actually get involved in that route. I don't see any movement in that direction.
I'm sure this discussion could have gone on very actively if it had it not been the last session. But I think the speakers have done brilliantly. They have tried to enumerate some specific options for India in the emerging geopolitical scenario of the Asia Pacific. I think there is a sense of the House that among the options is definitely not getting into conflict. That would be the worst option. I mean, that I think everyone is very clear on. But there are also points that have been made that very often, to prevent getting into conflict, you need to signal your resolve and your intention. And in that, perhaps we are institutionally weak in the fact that we sometimes send signals, strong signals, when we didn't mean to send any. And we don't send signals when we need to send. But this is a failing which I think Leela and Lata have very ably dealt upon. For instance, the formation of the strike corps is a very strong signal. I mean, that really was put out in the media. Whether one agrees with it or not is another issue. That we were suggesting that should there be conflict, you may not have the outcome that you think you will get. So those kind of things are very useful. And in conclusion, all I can say is that I would like to congratulate both speakers on bringing up some brilliant points and giving a very comprehensive presentation on the options that face us. May I ask you to join me in thanking them?